speaker series is a collaboration between our strategic commercial translation and future leaders capability building modules. So we're running a panel discussion today, followed by an interactive Q&A session. So have your questions ready. Now, I just remembered that I forgot to introduce myself. Most of you know me. I'm Diana Siu, and I'm the co-lead of Te Toki Mataora. So the first step in entrepreneur's experience explores the big leap from research to setting up a company. And we are really fortunate to have three founders who have made their mark in the HealthTech community with us today. So between them, they come from clinical and bioengineering backgrounds, as well as having a bent towards entrepreneurship. So what we want to do today is to get to know these individuals and what drives them, not just their companies. So now I'll just hand over to Peng Du, who leads who's one of the co-leads of our Future Leaders activity. And so Peng, take over from now.
Yeah, sure. Kila koto, everyone. So my name is Peng, and I'm a member of the Future Leaders module, although I think I'm probably not that in the future anymore compared to some of the younger startup people that I've seen. So we're very privileged today to be joined by a panel of very high caliber people who have made their mark in the translation side of their research. And to kick us off, I would like to ask each panelist to just give a quick overview of their journey to date, what got them involved, and what are some of the challenges they found, and where do they think this is all going. And I'll give a quick introduction of each panelist as we go. So in the order that they appear in my note, and before I introduce the first panelist, I'd like to make a quick disclosure of conflict of interest. I am also a member of the first panelist's company, Greg O'Grady, the founder and CEO of Alimetry. So Greg, please.
Thanks, Peng, and hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Subject very dear to my heart, and it's great to see this new initiative, Di, and all the enthusiastic support around it. So congratulations on getting this underway. So yeah, I'm Greg O'Grady. I come from a clinical background in surgery, actually. So I started out medical school and then did surgical training. And then I also have a technical background. I did a PhD in the Bioengineering Institute in Auckland as well, where I developed a taste for instrumentation and medical devices. Then I went back and carried on doing surgery. And when I came back and set up an academic lab, I kind of felt that my research wasn't having the kind of real world impact that I wanted. And that strongly motivated me to get into the entrepreneurship space. I set up a medical devices lab, the university supported it, and very quickly realized that if I actually wanted to make this work, then you had to take the bull by the horns and actually spin out the company yourself and champion it in order to get the technology right from that continuum of the basic research through to the industry. So first company we spun out was the Insides company for intestinal failure, making a medical pump device. And I led that for about 18 months or so before handing it over to a commercial CEO. And then very quickly spun out Alimetry, which I'm loving being the CEO of at the moment a couple of years later, and it's going very well. Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting journey. It's pretty wild. You've got to learn this huge range of skills that don't come naturally in academia, from regulatory and quality and manufacturing and business and capital raising and HR and IP and everything else. But that's part of the fun, is these steep learning curves everywhere you look. And I've got to say, it's a really enjoyable and fulfilling career.
Cool. Thanks, Greg. And the second panelist today is Liz Berryman, the CEO and founder of chnnl.
Yeah, tēnā koutou, everybody. Lovely to be with you. And yeah, a similar story. Started off as a clinician, so I was a registered nurse. And yeah, I did my Masters of Health Science in kind of the management side of things, and ended up being the practice manager of a medical centre in Auckland. And then I followed my dream to be a doctor. So I was a student down at the University of Otago, which was really great, but I got myself involved in quite a lot of student politics and leadership. So I was president of the Otago Medical Students Association, the New Zealand Medical Students Association, then ended up in governance roles with Health Informatics New Zealand and the New Zealand Medical Association and things like that. So very quickly ended up in the leadership and management side of things when I thought that I was going to be going into medical school to be an obstetrician. That was my dream. So I've kind of gone on a bit of a tangent there. But what happened was that it was a personal experience that I had during medical school that I saw that there was this massive problem and it needed fixing. And I was looking around going, who's solving this problem, and working with different colleges and things. And I just thought, someone as similar to Greg has to take the bull by the horns and actually just do something. And the best way to do that was to actually commercialize and go through that process and run a business and make it commercial, because then we'll get real tangible outcomes. So yeah, I call myself the accidental entrepreneur because I didn't set out to do that at all. And but yeah, it's the best thing, and it's been the steepest learning curve. Oh my gosh, being from clinical and then academia now into business. Oh my gosh, so much learning. And so I just had 3 little things, which was invest in yourself. So it's important to be able to upskill yourself to learn all these things. It doesn't come naturally. You have to actually learn it. Number 2, you have to back yourself. One of the things is like my American colleagues, they just like are so confident. Like, why are you guys so confident? Like, how do you know what you're doing? And they just back themselves. And so I think as Kiwis, we're kind of a bit tall poppy syndrome or humble. So that's my 3rd one. And my 3rd one was trust yourself. And that is that if you really want to do it, then you'll do it. And so just, it's to invest in yourself, back yourself, and trust yourself. Yeah. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Liz. And lastly, something not least, we have Seamus Tridenek, the founder and CEO of Awesome Ability.
Yeah, that's me. So my name's Seamus, and I guess a little bit different to the first 2 people that we've talked about. I'm not a clinician. I'm a purely technical sort of background. I, for my sins, studied engineering. And instead of going out and getting a real job, I decided to then do a PhD straight away. And that sort of gave me a pretty good in the 3D printing space. So back when I did my PhD, printing in metal was really just an emerging technology. And so from that sort of starting point, I was able to, I guess, get in early into commercializing some of that technology. Not having the clinical side, I think, has meant that I've always needed to bring other people in to fill the gaps of skills and technical things that I couldn't do. And so I guess now my role as a CEO is about orchestrating those different people. How do we bring these skills into the business? How do we give this entity that exists outside of me what it needs to flourish?
Awesome. Thanks for that, Seamus. So as you can see, a very wide range of backgrounds and technical capabilities, also interesting different companies and profiles. I'd like to open up the floor to questions and whether Di wants to start this one.
Yeah, sure. So thanks all 3 of you. I know you're really busy people, so we're very we're appreciative of your time. But I guess one question that a lot of the younger researchers have asked me is, how do you know it's the right time to take your technology to the next stage? When does it switch? When does that switch happen? Does it? And could you share your journey? Seamus, maybe we start with you, and then go to Greg and Liz.
For me, it was a really specific moment in time. So I was running a preclinical trial out at Lincoln University, and the vet that I employed to help me do those surgeries said to me, can we use this to help my patient? And so it was at that moment we went from saying, hey, we've got this cool technology which we're using in the human space, to saying, right here in front of me is a patient that needs my help now. And I guess that's the challenge is, do you pick that up and do you help that person, help that patient at that time? I don't know how more clear that moment could have been, but I guess we'll hear what other people have to say.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Greg?
Yeah, quite different from my two startups. The first one, we found an unmet need that we just wanted to get behind and develop a product and solve. And so that one, it was always a commercial vehicle, really. The intent was always there to solve this problem. And as soon as we had a product that was working well enough as a prototype, we spun out the company and the IP with it. The second one cooked for years in the university. And it took a long time to get to the point where we had confidence that this was definitely going to be a clinically and commercially useful entity. So when we had a prototype and data showing that this was something that clinicians wanted, we went out and formally formed the company at that time. So a maturity level came.
So I was going to say that I certainly remember when I'd walk and see Greg and he'll say, not yet. And the not yet was such a long time in my mind, but I really admire the discipline that you had, to actually turn the switch at the right time.
There's a lot to be said for cooking as long as possible in the university if you've got deep tech, because you're under this sheltered, beautiful environment where you can grow it, foster it. You don't have the commercial people breathing down your neck with timelines, and you can access great resources and great funding and commercial kind of development through the university as well. So there's no rush. The start line, things really heat up. So when you spin out, it's all on.
Yeah, and that's true. I'd say I've seen it firsthand with Greg and Alimetry. So Liz, what about you?
Yeah, a bit more of a slow burn as well. So I started off doing the advocacy, then we did the research, and we did 3 years of research, and still wasn't even thinking that it was going to be a commercial entity at all. We were just wanting to see real change. And so it became a point where we would presented to the Royal College of Surgeons in a conference in Adelaide, and it got the Best Education Prize, which was a pretty big deal, and it went in a magazine out to every single surgeon in Australia and New Zealand, and it was just about the research. And because it was an app-based, it had screenshots of the app, and the next day in my inbox, in my email, was 5 hospitals from across Australia and New Zealand saying, hey, can we have your app? And I was like, well, I'm a final year medical student. I'm not sure what we're doing with this. It's not going to be a big research thing, but I'm interested. And then one of the hospitals came back and said, look, we'll even pay you for it. And that's when I was like, oh, okay, they really want this. This is a big issue. And so then when they decided that we could put it into an actual product, then we had to do a lot of work. And so I went through actually Auckland Uni Services, which were really, really helpful in going through that commercialization process. There was some workshops and IP and all sorts of things that I hadn't ever thought about because we wasn't ever the plan to commercialize. And so it came a point where I was PGY1 at the stage. I was working at North Shore Hospital, and I was taking phone calls in the cleaning closets from hospitals going, hey, can we have your app? Can we have your app? So I think I had 4 hospitals lined up saying we want it. And I went to my husband and I said, look, I was having a baby. I was on mat leave. And I said, why not? I've got a year off. Why not start a business? So I can know the date that we started the business, because the date of incorporation is actually when I was in labour with our first child, and that's the 13th of November. So and then I haven't gone back. And it just took off since then because the pandemic hit, and then it was all on. So quite a different journey and an unexpected one. Yeah.
I can imagine, but the date will be etched forever in your mind, hey?
Yes.
Yes.
Liz, I just want to touch on, you said that moment when someone's willing to pay you money. And I think that's a really important moment, because certainly for me, and it sounds like for you as well, you may not think that you're ready or what you've been working on is good enough or finished, but it's still valuable to someone else at that, when that comes. And I think recognizing that and being willing to sell it to them, willing to give it to them, and sort of share what's dear to your heart with the world and let them be the judges is a big step to make.
Yeah. Yes, I can imagine that. And also I think that one weakness, I think, of researchers is that, it's kind of like we can't let go to some extent. And, and you keep refining and refining because you think that it's not good enough, but actually it might be, might not be the bells and whistles, but that first little product might be just good enough. So yeah. Ella, you've got a question.
Yeah, I wonder if you could maybe explain some of the support that you received along the way, whether you kind of went to some workshops to help upskill or funding, or maybe what was missing that could have been really helpful for you.
Yeah, I'm happy to start since my mic's already off. I had lots of support, which was fantastic. So Callaghan Innovation, they really helped out with some project grants to get going. And they also had the HealthTech Activator program, and the team there had some amazing programs that you can be a part of. And the best thing is getting to know other entrepreneurs in those groups as well, people in a similar stage, and you can all learn together. And then I had an amazing mentor, Lloyd McCann. He's CEO of Mercy. Yeah. And so he was amazing. Like, we'd catch up once a month. And as I said at the beginning about learning to trust yourself, it's important to have a mentor, somebody who can help you navigate things. And then also, yeah, university was interesting. Yeah, sometimes they were supportive and sometimes they weren't. So I've got mixed support there, but on the whole, very, very useful.
I was just going to butt in to say that what's really interesting between your three companies is that you kind of set up in a slightly different time frames, because Seamus came out in 2013 with Possibility, and then Liz in 2018. And actually, Liz and Greg, both your companies came out nearly the same time, but your first insights company was a bit earlier. So there's quite a change in the ecosystem, between 2013 and now. It'd be really good to reflect on what you've seen.
Yeah, I'll pick that up. So when we were getting started, Callaghan didn't exist. Back then, it was the Foundation for Research in Science and Technology, which had some similar programs. And so my PhD was actually funded through Forced as an industry-backed project. And what that meant for me as the student going through is that I was sort of empowered to walk on up to Jeff Chase's office and say, hey, look, this is the project that I want to do. These are the people that are going to pay for it. And I want you to be my supervisor because you're the biggest, baddest wolf on this floor. And I know if I do it with you, I'll get a good education. And the difference in that conversation and how that goes when you have some financial support is totally, out of this world compared to just doing someone else's pet project. And then I think because we always had one foot in the industry camp as well as working within the university environment. For me, that was easier to navigate what I call my personal freedom to operate. So how did I negotiate the position to use this technology, as opposed to worrying, how do I get this technology out of the university? It already existed outside of the university. There was a conversation to be had around, can I use this in a different domain? Can I use this to help animals instead of people? Can I, modify this technology so that it's not interfering with you or even helping you? And, we had a really supportive person with Jeff on the university side. We didn't have to engage with the beast that is the university's sort of commercialization arm, but we had a lot of support and we've built some really strong relationships on the government funding side now with Callaghan. And so I think, investing in those relationships, so that they're there when you need them, is a really big part of that.
Yeah, and I guess the two strengths here are the mentors that you had, Lloyd McCann and Jeff Chase. So they played a quite significant role too. So great. What about you?
Yeah, similar to Liz, the three themes would be mentors, incredibly valuable. You don't know what you don't know, and you almost need a range of mentors to complement the different aspects of what you're trying to do. The network, the infrastructure for innovation in New Zealand is pretty good. Callaghan has been a great funder, NZTE later on. The health grants, they've all been very supportive. And the third stream is the university. When I was a student, I did the Velocity program. That was a good learning experience, and I'd recommend it for people who want to get a kind of experience of entrepreneurship in a safe kind of environment. And also, we did find uni services extremely helpful all the way through, and they still are today. You know, they're our first and friendliest investor, and always incredibly supportive of what we're doing.
I think we have a question from the floor.
Ping, me, Simon Fraser from Victoria University School of Design. Yeah, I just have a question for all or any one of our panelists, looking at things from two different perspectives. What would be the biggest reward, or conversely, what is your biggest frustration in establishing a startup?
Liz, do you want to go first? Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's a great question, because there's so many frustrations. Which is the biggest? I suppose I'll start with the one that took me most by surprise, and that was the investment side of things. I didn't quite realize that there's this whole investment piece that goes alongside being an entrepreneur. I thought I was going to be in the product and doing sales and customers and all of that, but actually I spend half of my time dealing with investors and raising money and preparing for the next one. I don't know about the other two founders, but that's the early stage that I'm in at the moment. And it's really frustrating. HealthTech does not get as much funding as other ones. If you are fintech or, you know, other deep tech space or whatever, it seems to be the golden ones at the moment. They seem to get a lot of the funding. And so it is hard. And then also, I don't know whether it is because I'm female or what, but there's quite a few barriers in that investment stage, which is frustrating, because I'd like to just be getting out there and helping as many people as I can.
Interesting. How about you, Greg?
I mean, clearly the biggest strength, or the best part of it all, is just the ability to take your idea and scale it and have an impact. You know, when I was doing research, I found you'd publish a paper and no one would use it or could use it. You'd develop something and no one could pick it up and run with it. But here the opportunity is to do something useful and at scale, and, you know, impact patient care worldwide. And that's what we're trying to do. So that's really satisfying. The frustration side, we try not to think of it as a frustration because we try not to be emotional about it, but certainly in health tech, there's a lot of things you've got to jump over. And so regulatory and quality all the way through, you've just got to be absolutely, you know, step through it all and just grind away. It's sometimes a massive grind. And so that would be the main factor on the downsides, but it is what it is.
And Seamus?
Yeah, I think grind embodies a lot of that. It's a long slog, you know, and you do have to be in it for the long haul. For me, that the feeling of responsibility that you have for growing something, for looking after your team, for, you know, knowing that you can help your customers to make a difference, but delivering on that responsibility is a big burden. And then just, you know, like you say, it's about, you go in thinking you're about the product, and really it's not. You've got this whole different skill set to learn. So trying to keep up with your own sort of beast of your own creation is a constant challenge. So prepare to sacrifice your mental health and your time with family and all those kind of things that go along with it. It's really hard to get the balance there. Because it is something that you care about. And if you didn't care about it, you'd never last, really. Yeah. But I think the flip side of that is seeing what you've created, making that positive difference. 2 days ago, I received an email out of the blue from a researcher at Cornell University who wants to use our products in a study because they saw a student presentation that someone did using our products. And you just go, that's someone I have no connection with prior, who has seen what we do and says, that's what I want.
It certainly seems that this is something that's suited for very driven individuals, which I guess comes as no surprise. One thing that I've noticed about the sort of setup of all three companies is that, rather than offering a product, you're kind of almost offering a service of sorts, whether that's a medical device coupled with an algorithm or an app coupled with presumably some sort of analytics in the background, or implants partnered with design decisions. This is a clear, I guess, separation of services there. You have a product and then you have an algorithm in the background supporting a lot of the data. How did you go about the sort of regulatory, I guess, approach there? Presumably it's quite different depending on the nature of your product and who you apply your product to. I don't know who wants to go first. Maybe Greg.
Yeah, interesting comments. I think the two things that sprung to mind while you were talking were, in terms of that service or the offering, is product market fit. Is what you're doing as a startup for a long time is you're just trying to get to product market fit, and whatever offering you develop as your product has to solve the customer's needs in a meaningful way. And so that journey is building an offering and maybe a service or everything around that. The second thing is community. What is the target market for this, and who are the users, and what do they care about, and connecting with them in a meaningful way is the other thing. On the regulatory side, this is a maze. And the one thing I learned about regulatory is it's not medicine, it's not engineering, it's not science, it's law. And law is a completely foreign language to most of us. And you need a spirit guide to help you through this. So you need someone who's done it before and is a lawyer, and someone hopefully in the team if you've got a complex medical device. And so you just have to find people who know what they're doing and start early, because if you leave the regulatory too late, then you'll find you missed a whole bunch of stuff you should have known from day one.
Certainly, that's very interesting. And Seamus?
For me, we play in a slightly different space. I've got a lot of experience with human medical devices, and people wonder why implants cost so much, and the majority of the cost of them is quite oftentimes the regulatory burden that has to be borne to get those products to market and make sure that they are safe. For our products, we exist largely outside of traditional frameworks like an FDA approved device. That doesn't mean we have any less responsibility to our end users. At the end of the day, we're helping patients to sort of get better. And so navigating that maze, understanding it, is absolutely critical to choosing your way through it. So it takes, I'd say a couple of hours of reading every night for your entire life to sort of get a handle on that. I was really fortunate that, I had a few really good spirit guides, companies like Instec, who have a really deep strength in regulatory, working with, Johnson & Johnson and DePuy, and understanding what their needs are. Gives you an edge, helps you to sort of see what's not just around the corner, but what's going to happen in 2 years from now, what's going to happen in 5 years from now, what's going to happen if I sell my company. What are they buying? Are they going to be buying an approved device, or are they going to be buying someone's hobby plaything that needs to be reinvented from the ground up with a design history file? Getting a really good handle on all of those stepping stones is critical, and you just can't do enough work in that space, and you do need help, really. And you need help in your team, not just a consultant here and there. Yeah, it's got to be absolutely core to what you're doing.
For sure.
Just on the service side of things, I guess we realized quite early on, when our customers were asking for help as to how to use our products, that was a valuable thing, a valuable piece of the puzzle needed to empower our customers to use our products effectively. And so now it's quite integral in that we don't sell a widget, we sell a solution, and the widget's an important part of that. We make our money on the widget, but they couldn't use that without those wraparound services. And so it's just realizing what you're really selling, I guess.
And Liz?
Yeah, again, a similar spirit guide. I have an amazing lawyer who is used to dealing with startups. So she's specialist in New Zealand startups, and she gave me some wise advice, which was to not label ourselves a medical device, and to position ourselves into the HR tech, because we're mental health for employees. So I don't even know if I said what Channel does, we do have a clinical team that support everything that we do and is 24/7 available, but we position ourselves in a legal sense in the HR world. So we still have GDPR, we've still got HIPAA compliance, we've still got all of those things that we need to work through, but it's not as heavy as an FDA approval as such. So get good quality advice when it comes to this stuff, because otherwise you'll be caught up for a long time and a lot of money and a lot of pain that you might not need to be in. So get advice.
Sounds like getting advice early on in your venture is quite an important and critical step. I think we have a question from Grant, and there's also a question in the chat, but we'll ask that after Grant's question.
Yeah, thanks guys. I'm kind of interested in what individual risk you took on in forming these companies, whether you yourselves took on financial risk or loans or anything, or whether you were able to leverage your knowledge with investors to limit that. I think there's quite a thing as a researcher within the university. I think most of us possibly a little bit risk adverse, perhaps, in the entrepreneurial space. So I'd value your thoughts on that.
Great question. Maybe I can be my perspective, because I've taken an extraordinary amount of risk. And I kind of have this mantra, don't look down, because sometimes you kind of walk in a tightrope way up here, and I've left this amazing career as a professor of surgery to do this CEO job of a startup, and the risk is extraordinary. I think one thing I identified with was something I read in a book, I think it was by Adam Grant, talking that entrepreneurs, they're often very good at hedging risk. They're not really full risk takers. And I identified with this because for as long as possible, I kept second jobs, stayed with things as long as I possibly could until it was no longer tenable. And I just had to make the full jump. And this is something that entrepreneurs often do. So in university, you can maintain as much as possible what you're doing until you're sure that you're 100% going to commit to this. I guess that's my experience, but you've got to take a risk. You've got to be all in at some point if you want this to succeed.
And Liz?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a whole year between I got that first email saying I'll pay for it to actually having 4 clients signed up, ready to go. And so that whole time I was working as a doctor and taking phone calls in between shifts and meeting people in the hospital cafes. Don't tell the DHB. But I think that's one way I kind of could judge that. And so I knew that once I had gotten to a certain amount of customers that the risk was okay to take. But at the end of the day, it is always a risk, and then went straight into raising a funding round. And if you do the friends and family round and you take family money, then, it is quite a lot of risk you take. I went the angel round way, which was nice, so that I had about 20 to 30 angels who had all put in money each. So they spread the risk across the group. So that was quite a good way to manage that. And also, but you are taking a massive risk, and there's probably no way to get around that. But I think entrepreneurs are, I think someone said, we are a unique breed, and so it's something you have to be very comfortable with sitting with, is the amount of risk that you live with. You're employing people. That was a big thing when I got my first employees. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have regular income to pay these people. They've got families, and that was quite a lot of pressure. So but you explain the risks to everyone, and if they're willing to accept, then you all get in there together.
And Seamus?
Yeah, I think the healthy appetite for risk is, you're never going to make it otherwise. At the end of the day, if you're not willing to put your money where your mouth is, you can't realistically expect anyone else to put their money in as well. So that doesn't have to look like mortgaging your house, but it does look like choosing to do this instead of other options, which has a pretty huge financial impact sometimes. In my situation, I was a student when I started my company. it certainly meant that I chose to put my company first instead of things like saving for a house. Every dollar that I had was going into, placing an extra order or something like that. And you kind of go by the skin of your teeth sometimes. And at some point, I guess the bills you have to pay next month outweigh your personal capacity to pay them, and then the game changes, and that's sort of when the company has to put on its big boy pants and get some money into the business. That risk profile changes and you step outside, and now you've got this entity that you have to sort of steer the ship on. But yeah, I think I like betting on things I know the outcome of. You can't always engineer that, but everything you can do to reduce that risk is going to add value to your business. So your job is to keep chipping away at those things that are going to be, trip you up.
Certainly, from the descriptions from all the panelists, it feels to I feel like risk is has a certain connotations associated with it, right? It sounded more about opportunity cost and your level of commitments to your individual ventures, and I guess one of the challenges there is the risk is often associated with the business decision. And I guess when we all started in this field, none of us are really business people. So again, I feel like it goes back to that point. It's getting the right advice from the right people early on is probably quite valuable. I realize we do have a few questions in the chat already, so maybe Di can facilitate the next one. Thank you.
Sure. So I would just make one last comment, which is that, there's opportunity and there's risk, but what I will say is I really admire the three of you and all the entrepreneurs out there that have actually made that step, because it's not just a financial, balancing act. There's also the sudden realization that, there's a time cost and also responsibility to your family, to your funders, and to your staff. So I really admire the three of you for what you're doing. Okay, we've got two questions here. One is from Holly Gooch, and then we'll come to Rishi. Holly, where are you?
Kia ora, sorry. I was just going to get you to ask a question because I was eating my lunch. It's my only opportunity to eat lunch. Sorry.
Sorry. Never mind. Better to see you in person.
So my question was, I was really interested in this talk, having been to a few entrepreneurial ones. I'm in the sort of health education space, so educational psychology. And one of the things that I'm grappling with at this early stage, and I wonder if, how the three of you have dealt with it, is that conundrum that you want to make your product or service available to as many people as possible because of the benefits it will provide, so improved health outcomes and so on. But how do you manage that and balance that with the desire to make it commercially viable?
So who would like to take it first?
Yeah, I think they're just so linked. You can't provide a great product unless it's commercially viable. If you look at a great example in New Zealand of Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, for example, they've had this model of just sustainable, profitable growth based on having great products, and they've treated 50 million people with these products, and there's an incredible synergy there that allows them to reinvest in new products while contributing to the New Zealand ecosystem. So I don't see the dichotomy in my mind so much. Obviously, one is profit driven and one is health driven, but at the end of the day, it's a symbiosis.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, for us in our position, if people aren't buying your products, they're not using your products, so you're not making a difference. So as a mission-driven organization to help people do better surgery, you can't help them if you don't have a commercially viable product. If they can't look it up and buy it, you can't help them. So they're one and the same thing, really.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I really struggled with this one as well. And in the early days, I was wanting to get people on and to try it and, just to get that product market fit as possible. And we found a really interesting thing is that the people who were getting it for free or next to free weren't seeing the value in it and weren't getting the most out of it. And the people that were paying the most were actually using it, getting the higher engagement and getting the highest outcomes. And I think it was to do with when you pay for something, you actually value it, and then the real stuff comes. So yeah, I'm now not shying away from saying this is the price and this is why we actually charge money, because then you'll actually use it. Yeah, so it was interesting. But we also have, like, I have an ability to now have some clients that we take on as our pro bono clients. We've got a school in India that's using it because they were just going through some really heavy duty stuff with COVID and some sick people. So we're able to have our charitable cases as well. But most of the time we need to stay viable, and tech is not cheap. And the war for talent in tech right now is really huge. So yeah, we have to pay our people to get this product out there. So yeah, commercially viable.
Thanks, Liz. I guess one comment I'd make is that from various discussions around the community, there's sometimes you meet this, I guess, a situation where maybe from a researcher's point of view, business is not a nice thing. Making money that's not kind of what drives science or clinical focus sometimes, and people need to get through that hurdle. But for me, if you don't actually have a product that can become commercially viable, whether you make billions of dollars or whether it's just economically sustainable, it's not going to get out there to the patients who you're trying to help. So actually doing business, taking it out into the commercial world is not a bad thing. I guess that's my observation. So Rishi, you've got a question.
I do. Hi, everyone. And it's been amazing actually listening to all of the stuff that, you're sharing. So I actually have a two-part question. One is what Diana just touched upon, is, taking science from the lab into the community or into the market. So one of the things is that, so I work for ESR, which is a CRI, and we, one of the things is that all science project actually starts from either university or a research institute. So my first question is, how were you able to actually move out from an academic setting into a more business setting, keeping in mind that when you're developing all your ideas and all your proof of concepts, your IP is actually owned by the institute or the organization that you're working with. So how did you detach yourself from there and form like a separate entity, not owing anything back to the research institute? And the second thing is that taking your product from a proof of concept to a viable product that can be, or an MVP or a minimal viable product that can be commercialized, what was the time frame and how did you convince the investors to not bug you with unwarranted deadlines? Thank you.
That's great. There's a lot in that, Rishi. I thank you very much for that. I think I'll just start, maybe you guys can take up some of the other angles, but a funny story, well, not funny, but in hindsight, it's a good story because I was doing one of the randomized controlled trials that we had going. This is when I was a medical student, still developing the research. And I got ethics and I got all the approvals from all the host organizations and everything was all set to go. And then there was a grant that we had applied for that we had been conditionally accepted, had pulled out at the last minute. So we didn't get the money. And I was like, oh no, what are we going to do? Like I had this app that was being developed. And so I went to them and said, look, hey, how much is it going to cost just to get this going? And it was 10 grand, which actually in hindsight is flipping cheap. And so I thought, okay, 10 grand, let's do it. So I actually went and personally paid the $10,000, got the study up and going and ran it. And it was an incredible study. And so actually in hindsight, it was really good because if I'd accepted the grant money, I would have been tied up in some IP and there would have been some interesting things back and forwards. Because I was the only student researcher on it, I just asked all the professors who were the supervisors to write letters to say that they wouldn't take any of the IP. And then thank goodness the university has now been quite forward thinking in the IP and things like that. And if there's no, PhD students and stuff involved, then it's a bit quite straightforward. So in hindsight, although I was so gutted to miss out on that grant, I'm pleased that, again, coming back to that question about risk, taking the risk, taking the personal hit, 10 grand to get that study up and going and seeing if we did have an MVP. So at the end of it, we had an MVP and then could take that out. Now, that was not commercially viable. It was not a robust enough for all the data and all the stuff that we have to now have in place, like the privacy impact statements and the cyber risk assessments and all that we now have to do. So Callaghan then funded us to make that MVP into one that we could sell commercially. So,
and Callaghan does not have a part in the business. So this grant, okay.
No, so it's 50-50 payment. So when I went out to the angels and pitched for seed investment, I was like, you are being 50-50 matched with Callaghan for this grant. And so then that helped them to be a bit more comfortable as well, that their money was being doubled pretty much.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
A couple of quick thoughts. One is that the ecosystem has matured a lot for spinning out companies now, and uni services, the one I've dealt with, have been, it's what they do. So there's a very well-trodden path. Having said that, it can be optimized and worked and done at a correct time, and there's a lot of variables. So just seek advice before you pull the trigger, I guess, from both the academic side or someone who's done it rather, as well as uni services. In terms of MVPs, it's an interesting term for health tech devices. I struggle with it. It's not like because we have a regulatory barrier, you can't go out and sell it and see how it goes, like a lot of lean startup methodologies suggest. You kind of need a minimally excellent product to get it through. So, but you can still do a lot of that MVP work on research prototypes and just talking to clinicians and making sure that what you're doing is going to make sense and is actually needed and is product market fit. You have to kind of do that kind of a bit more through discussions and networking and hitting the basics before you can make sure that you've got that product market fit that you're after.
Well, being a clinician, I guess this product, because it was targeting clinical sciences, obviously helped you leverage that platform, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, some of the times the thing is that when you're targeting to investors who are not related anywhere to the scientific field, you don't have that connection or the understanding, and it's almost like you can't go to them with a proof of concept. You actually need to have a product that they can actually see working for them to actually invest in, even have faith in you. So yeah, but thanks.
I'm a friend.
Seamus, you've got some remarks?
Yeah. I guess my experience was interesting starting as a student, and that making sure you read your employment contracts, making sure you know what the IP agreement says to the letter, understanding your position is critically important to that. So in my specific case, all of the IP for my PhD was vested to the company. So when I went to then take some of that IP and build a company around it myself, that conversation was one that I had with that company. And I was fortunate that I had built a strong relationship with the key decision makers there that, I pitched it to them and said, hey, this is what I want to do and how this can work for us, and sort of got the green light there. Subsequently, that company got a significant amount of money to do further research, and I joined the team as a postdoc to lead that, which put me into an interesting situation in that I owned my own company doing similar work. I was doing industrial sponsored research as an employee of a university. And at that point, I think I don't know if I'd been worn down enough or just hardened. I sat down with the university's lawyer and I said, when are you paying me? And what is it that you're paying me to do? Because if you're not paying me to do it, it's mine.
Yeah.
And so I think making really clear boundaries, if I'm doing something on Saturday afternoon for a dog, that's different to Monday morning for a person. And there's going to be gray areas, clear them up. Have the conversations around it, because if you don't have freedom to operate, you are dead in the water. And when it comes to those IP things, those universities might have clawback on it. If you've got a co-inventor on a patent, you think you're home free, and someone says a couple of years later, hey, hold on a minute, in my book it says that I talked about that the day before, you're screwed. So you really have to get it clear in your own mind first. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I think something Liz mentioned at the start of the session about our American colleagues being so confident. And I guess another feature about our American colleagues, they're very paranoid about IP. So it's something we should, because we can learn about it. Given that we're a little bit short on time, and I know Cambrian has his hand up for a very digital hand up for a very long time, perhaps we could keep the last question brief.
Yeah, well, I've just got quite a short question anyway. Thanks for the talk so far. My question is more specifically for Liz in the mental health space. Just wondering whether you've noticed any hunger from investors in your product for you to prove the sort of effectiveness of your product, whether that's their main consideration or whether there's other factors that they consider.
Oh my goodness, the wild, wild world of investors. You just don't know what you're going to get. Like, you might get someone who is expertise in health, and they really want to see those outcomes. And I actually really enjoy those ones because, you know, that's, as a clinician, that's what we are really focused on, is making sure that we're actually got evidence that we're making things better. And so I think that that's our kind of our selling point. But talking to 90% of other investors, they don't care at all. I don't even get asked that question. Which is really sad. They want to know about engagement and how much people are using it. I'm like, what about the people that are using it? Does it actually make a difference? And no, they just want to know about scalability. They want to know about percentage of uptake. They want to know all that kind of stuff. So that was a big surprise. And yeah, it's investors hard. Like, they're out there and they've got a particular thing they're looking for. They're looking for a triangle, right? And they might have a particular background about why they want that particular triangle to invest in. But you've got a circle. And you just need to know pretty quickly, are you going to be the same? Are you what they're looking for? Are you not? And then the best thing to do is be like, okay, we're not a fit. And it's taken me, you know, a good year now to realize that, yeah, just don't take it personally. Not every investor is going to want to invest in you, and you need to find the one that's going to be the right fit for you. It's kind of like dating. You don't know rhyme or reason what people have got in their heads for why they want to do things. So yeah, just keep being true to yourself and trust yourself. Hope that answers.
Thank you, Liz. I believe Sujan has a comment that he would like to make. If there's, please keep it brief.
Yeah, yeah, just comment on the challenges that we face at ESR, which also Rishi commented during his question. Is one is that the belief that most complex problems emerge out of academics, but I guess the landscape is changing recently within New Zealand and globally, that, you know, the science doesn't always have to be through academics. There's a lot more is happening in the private sector and non-academic, and a lot of innovation is happening in the non-academic sector. And that's one of the things we're trying to push, to think, for scientists to think that, you know, there's a lot more is happening than the academic thinking.
Mm.
Which did the panelists have an opinion on that, like your experience on that?
Absolutely. Having lived in both worlds, the vast majority of research happens in the industrial sector. You know, just look at the number of PhDs. You know, how many are working in universities, how many are working not in universities. We are constantly in a research and innovation phase, and a lot of medtech companies have a huge amount of spend in that area. So I think, you know, it's a fallacy to think that all of the good ideas come from academics. Some do, but there's a heck of a lot that happens outside of the walls of that ivory tower.
For sure. Now comes to the most stressful part about any moderator's job, is to try to come up with a semi-intelligent summary of all the of all the comments that's been made. So my best attempt is this. It's based on the discussions so far today, which were wonderful. It seemed like, you know, the key really is to provide a meaningful service through a commercially viable strategy, which is implemented through technologies, regulatory implementations, and financial backings, all three of which have different levels of perceived risks, but it's about how to manage those risks, and it's about commitments and personal and opportunity costs. Well, that's my summary, and I'd like to thank the panelists, and I'd like to hand the podium over to Di for any concluding remarks.
So thanks, Peng. So I guess I'll take my summary into the more, I guess, EQ type field. And I'll go back to what you said, Liz, which is invest in yourself, back yourself, and trust yourself. And I think that that is true whether you're starting a company as an entrepreneur, whether you're embarking on a research project, or actually even in what you do and decisions that you make in daily life. So that was my summary from a slightly different perspective, putting our 3 founders into the space of just ordinary human beings like all of us. So this has been a wonderful inaugural speaker series. So thank you very much, everyone. I just want to remind you that, I guess it's quite a different, quite a wide audience here from academia and CRIs and DHBs, etc. But I just want to remind you that if you are just starting out on your journey, Te Toki Mataora has the networks and some early stage funding to support you. And that early stage funding does not come with any IP caveats or anything. What you develop belongs to you and your organization. So the only thing you need to do, and maybe going back to what Seamus said, is that make sure that you do connect back to your tech transfer offices and understand what your IP positions might be. Now, following this this panel, what we thought we'd try is actually an open mic session next week on Tuesday, 12 to 1. And that open mic session is really for, any one of you who wants to come together just for that hour and just have a discussion about what we've heard today and maybe pick up some of the final points of this panel. So with that,
sorry, before we go, Helen just reminded me to have a plug-in about the session tomorrow targeted more at the early career researchers and the future leaders module.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have let you have your plug as well.
No, I just did that. That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you need more information about Te Toki Mataora, go to the CMDT webpage, which is www.cmdt.org.nz. So with that, and 1 minute to spare, I'll give you back 1 minute of your life. Thank you so much. And thank you very much, Liz, Greg, and Seamus, and Peng, my co-host, and Ella, who actually coordinated this for us. See ya.
Thank you, everyone. See ya.